Shalom Aleichem to everyone. Good evening, good night, and Chaim. And today we're going to speak about a question which used to be very common. It used to be very common because wine used to be pretty rare. We find in Chazal, for example, David Koiser is the whole discussion, people who don't have wine. Nowadays, wine is more rare, but nonetheless, the question is still often relevant for kiddushim and for people who don't like wine, for example. And the question is, can you make kiddush on other beverages, on other drinks, kiddush and havdalah? What's the status of different drinks? And also, what about this minig to take one of these snack glasses and make a quick kiddush on a shot glass of whiskey? I don't know if anyone here does that now and again, but is that legit or not? All right, so that's what we're going to be speaking about, and as we'll see, things are not so simple. But on the other hand, there are a number of alternatives of different things that we can do for kiddush. Certainly, when we're in circumstances that we don't have wine or outside the house. Or whatever it is. All right. So first of all, there's a mitzvah d'oraisa of making kiddush, right? The Gemara learns this out from the word zachar, right? Zachar is yom haShabbos lekadshei, and the Gemara dashens zachreu b'knisasa. You have to remember. You have to recall the Shabbos when it comes in, and also when it comes out, right? B'knisasa. At the beginning of Shabbos, we make kiddush, and at the end, we make havdalah. And the Gemara also says, "Achreu ala yain." You make kiddush on wine. However, it's not so simple whether kiddush on wine is actually min haTorah. Rashi holds it is. The Rambam says no. The Rambam says kiddush is d'oraisa, but kiddush ala yain is d'Rabbanan. But all agree that kiddush hayoyim, right, what Chazal called kiddush rabbah, kiddush by day, that's for sure d'Rabbanan, right? So we have kiddush by night, which is d'oraisa, and on wine might be d'oraisa, but kiddush by day is for sure d'Rabbanan. And therefore, as we'll see, there are differences between kiddush at night and kiddush by day. And the other thing, by way of introduction, and I haven't brought sources for this because it's more by way of introduction, is can you make kiddush on bread? All right, so the first source over here is Kuf Zayin Amdalef. The Gemara B'Shachim Kuf Vav Amdalef speaks about kiddush on bread. All right, can you make kiddush on bread? And the Gemara says that if you read Rishonim, it's not there's different Rishonim in the Gemara Daf Kuf Vav, but on the question of making a kiddush on bread, so generally speaking, we make kiddush on wine. Like the Chinuch explained, because wine is shmak and it makes us happy, and it's also filling, it's satiating, it makes us happy. There's a lot of virtues of wine. However, bread is also something kosher, right? Bread is nice. Bread gives you a feeling of satisfaction. Bread is very important, and therefore, even though the principal takana is on wine, that doesn't come to exclude any other possibilities. And therefore, the Gemara says in Daf Kuf Vav that if bread is chavid, if a person really enjoys a shmak of bread, right, he has a good loaf, or he just prefers bread. A person doesn't like wine, and then he should make kiddush on bread because he'll enjoy more the bread than the wine. So the Gemara says in Psachim Kuf Vav. And this is rule, meaning the Rambam and the Shulchan Aruch. It's in Reish Ayin Aleph, the Shulchan Aruch, and the Shulchan Aruch says, yeah, if a person likes bread more than wine, he should make kiddush on bread. Anyone here do this?
No, but we should use donuts instead.
Use donuts instead. Yeah, that's an interesting question. I would not use donuts for kiddush. The main reason being is because since donuts are deep fried after they are baked, or they're not baked at all, they're just deep fried, then they don't have the full teras pas and therefore donuts would not be recommended for this. But you can do like a very tasty bread. Generally speaking, this is not a very common minhag. The reason for that is the Rambam. The Rambam in Reish Aleph says that we like to make kiddush on wine, and even if we like bread very much, nonetheless, we're choishesh for those Rishonim, Rabbeinu Tam, and others who say that you shouldn't make kiddush on bread at all, only make kiddush on wine and so on. However, the Biur Halacha there says that if someone really loves bread, he can make kiddush on bread. The Biur Halacha makes a distinction between. He says if you just prefer bread to wine, then you know what, make kiddush on wine. It's better. But if you really don't like wine, and there are such people, then you can make kiddush on bread. That's what the Mishnah says. Well, if you're making kiddush on bread, then you would have to wash before kiddush, like the good Yekisha minhag. And then, I mean, our Germanic friends, they do this anyway. They wash before kiddush. And if you're making kiddush on bread, then you have no alternatives. So you would say, right, Sabrima and Baruch Hashem and then Baruch Hashem kiddush, and then you eat your bread. Sounds weird, but that's what you do. All right, now why is this an introduction? Because when we come to the Gemara in Kuf Zayin Amud Aleph, this is the Gemara that speaks about other beverages for kiddush. So bread comes into the equation somehow. And if we look at the Gemara, this is page 1 on the sources. So it says, we see where the underlining begins. Amalei Mar Yenuka Umar Kshisha, Bread Rav Chisda, le Rav Ashi. All right, they both came and they told Rav Ashi, Zim Nechada, once, Ikla Amema le'asrin, Amema came to town, but le'havalan chamra, and we didn't have any wine. Asina de shichra, we brought in beer, v'lei avdil, and he didn't make havdalah on the beer. The Gemara doesn't go into what did he do for kiddush, right? Presumably because big deal, you make kiddush on bread. But now the question is, what did he do for havdalah? So the Gemara says he didn't make havdalah. Ubas tabas is an expression from Daniel. It means he went to bed without eating anything, right? Because he didn't make havdalah, so he figured he's not allowed to eat. Lamachar, the next day, tarachna v'aisinale chamra. We made a great effort and we brought him some wine. V'avdil v'tay midi. Then he made havdalah on Sunday, and then he ate. All right, Lashana, the next year, right, on his annual visit, to Ikla Asrin, he came again. Lahavalam chamra, and we didn't have any wine. Same story. Asina Shikra, we said, okay, let's bring him some beer. Let's try again. Amar Ihachi, if so, meaning 2 years in a row. So Chamar Medina. This is Chamar Medina. All right, this is the national beverage. It's a beverage which is prevalent, national, important. We'll see exactly how do you define Chamar Medina, because obviously this is going to be an important question in defining what you can make kiddush and havdalah on. How do you define Chamar Medina? But for Amema's purposes, because he came back the second year and he saw that once again they brought out their beer, so we see that it's Chamar Medina. Rashi says, Ein yain acher ba'ir hazot. There's no other wine in this place. Kiyem shecha. There's only beer. Hilkot mavdidin. Rashi seems to be quite a strict definition of Chamar Medina. There's no wine, and the main thing you have is beer rather than wine. And then Rashi says, V'chein halacha, aval mayim lo ikru. But water can't be Chamar Medina. However, beer can be Chamar Medina. All right. So we find in this Gemara that you can make havdalah on Chamar Medina. The Gemara says Shemaim in class. We won't go into it because it's not our sugya. Halachas of havdalah. And then afterwards we have Barminei. Right? Barminei Rav Huna Rav Chisda. Maule kiddush Shechra. Can you make kiddush on beer? Right? We spoke now about Havdalah, and we saw that you can make Havdalah on Chamar Medina. But what about kiddush? So he told him, Ama Hashta, Uma Pirzuma V'Te'ini V'Asni, all these different types of beer, right? Fig beer and berry beer and different types of beer. The Baimene Merav that we asked Rav and Rav Chia, Merevi, V'Rei Pasha Deish Shechra, but this Shechra happens to be date beer. It's clear from further on in the Gemara that this is date beer. I'm not a beer expert. Well, some type of beer. So he said, no, you can't make kiddush on this. Not kiddush, the lemechachin and ilave. Aval avdali magdalena, he thought kiddush no, but avdali yes. Amalu Rav Chisda no. Achi amarav change it. Mekancham al kechem ivdilim alav. Same halacha. Can't make kiddush. Can't make avdala. You can't do either. And etmanami amrav tachlif amravim amshvot shem mekancham al kechem ivdilim alav. You can't make kiddush nor avdala on beer. And then we have a story, Levi. Date beer.
What about normal beer?
Yeah, so this apparently would apply to all beers, even though we find before that the Gemara makes a statement that concerning different types of beer, the question was asked to Rav and Rav to Rav Chia, and I'm sorry, Rav to Rav Chia and Rav Chia to Rebbe, and he didn't give any answer. But it seems like a generally negative approach to all types of beer. However, the anecdote that the Gemara brings now, Levi sent this super duper beer, right? Levi shadalei le Rav or le Rebbe. Shechra about to Rav it must be Shechra about Tlesar Magni beer that was put through the process of passing the water through the dates 12 times, each time different dates, right? And Tame have a basin tuva, and this was exceedingly sweet. And I'm kagayin zer royal kaddish. This is kishma. This is royal for kiddush. So we already see that there's something a little bit subjective here. It depends on what type of drink, how good it is, right? This is as good as wine. This is such a about the beer that this is good enough. Later on, he gave him diarrhea, and then he says, it's not worth it, and if it's that bad, then we shouldn't make a bracha on it either. And then later, you can imagine, 12 rounds of dates, whatever, can be seriously damaging. And then down below, right, we have other opinions. Rava says that someone who makes kiddush on beer, his entire drink should be beer. You shouldn't have enough money to buy wine because it's a bad thing to do. And down at the bottom we have all right. So we find over here in the Gemara, really we find a range of opinions, right? We saw at the beginning that if it's Chamar Medina, then you can make Havdalah on beer. Then we saw Rav Huna asking Rav Chisda, and Rav Chisda says no kiddush. And the Gemara says no kiddush and also no Havdalah, meaning we put them together. Kiddush and Havdalah goes together. And then afterwards we have opinions this way and we have opinions that way. So clearly, this is not we don't have any clear decisions emanating from this Gemara. However, if you look in the Torah, page 2, we have the Torah. And the Torah gives us the psak, which is the psak based on the Rosh, the Reed, the Ravan, other Rishonim. And the Rambam has a slightly different psak, and we'll see what the Rambam says. The Torah brings the Rambam also. So the Torah says like this: "B'makom she'ein yain matzui," in a place where wine is uncommon, mekachin ala sheichar, then you can make kiddush on beer, v'shar mashkin, and also other beverages. Kevin she'ein yain matzui sham, habishar mashkin Chamar Medina. So it's a little bit like Rashi, right? Like we saw in Rashi, where there's no wine, So other beverages can take on a national status. They're called Chamar Medina. Rashbam Chamar Medina when there's no wine. Right? This wasn't Rashi, of course. This was the Rashbam that we read before. It wasn't Rashi. Rashi himself doesn't say much about this. But the Rashbam, what we read before was the Rashbam. Now, V'yesh Mefarshim says the Torah, to Rebbe Medina Elim Kain Shelo Yehi Yain Gadel Mahalach Yoim Kol Savi Ba'ir. There's no wine at all. Only then is it Chamar Medina. Divrei Rambam Zal, Yirai Shein Mekanchim Olav. You can't make kiddush at all on wine, on other beverages. Because of Medina Shurov Yeina Sheichar Afal Pi Shein Mekanchim Olav Mavdilin Olav. Kol Chamar Medina. So the Rambam has a chumrah, but he also has a kula. The Rambam has a chumrah, and the Rambam says you can never make kiddush on sheichar, on beer, or on other beverages. And like we saw, you can make kiddush on bread, right? But not on other drinks, right? The Gemara, look at the Rashbam. The Rashbam on page 1, Rashbam says it's on the second wide line. Mekadesh HaShechva, this is one of the stories in which he made kiddush on wine, and the Gemara said, and the Rashbam explained, even though he had wine, he still made kiddush on beer. If you enjoy bread, then Mekadesh HaRifta. And that's why one of the Man Amram here, it's Rav Huna, it was, he made kiddush on beer. And when Rav saw this, Rav said, oh, I know why you're making kiddush on beer, because you've just started making money from beer. You've started selling beer. And because you're selling beer, then you've become very fond of beer, and therefore you love it more, and therefore you make kiddush on beer. Yeah.
The way that the Torah phrases the definition of Chamar Medina is very interesting. Because
yes.
He says that it's contingent on whether or not you have wine or not.
Yes.
If you have wine, it's Shiur, there's no such thing as Chamar Medina.
Yes, that's correct. And it is very interesting. The Shevet HaLevi has a tshuva in which he points this out, and he gives the following explanation or possible explanation. He says, you know what, in the days of Chazal, and up to a certain time, I don't know exactly when, we have to ask historians of wine till when this took place. But the custom was that every meal you have wine. Wine is part of meals. So he explains that the assumption is, in a place where you have wine, so your table drink, what do you bring out at the table is wine. You're not going to bring out something else. But in a place where there's no wine, then you bring out the alternative, and you bring out beer, and then beer can be a Chamar Medina. But in a place where there's wine, then you're not going to bring out the beer in the meal. You're going to bring out wine. And that's how he explains why nowadays, even though we have wine, other things can still be Chamar Medina. The reason being that we just don't use wine at all. You know, even in our regular meals, even though we have wine,
We're not French.
we're not French, exactly. And therefore, he wasn't French. So.
I believe that they didn't have drinking water, good quality water, so they used wine, obviously distilled and fermented as their source of liquid. Now, nowadays we have quality water to drink, so wine isn't always in the cellars. We don't have cellars full of wine.
Well, I mean, they definitely drank water. The Gemara definitely speaks about drinking water in many places. Maybe near a well. But they had. Water was, still I think the elixir of life more than wine. I'm not sure. This needs to be checked out. But all of the Rishonim speak about water, and they're all very busy saying that even if water has become your staple and you're serving water at every meal, water can't be Chamar Medina. The question is why, and the question is whether that will apply to other drinks like, I don't know, soda or Coca-Cola. Can that be Chamar Medina, even though it's It's mainly water. So what? So this date beer is also mainly water. It's water that's been passed through a lot of dates, and it gets the taste of dates. So that was the same apply to Coca-Cola or not. We'll see about that later. But so yeah, I mean, I think the reason probably why they had wine rather than water is because wine is just much better than water. Let's face it, it's more geschmack. Anyway, so that's what the Torah says. The Torah rules. He doesn't rule like the Rambam. He brings the Rambam at the end, but he doesn't rule like the Rambam. And he rules that you can make kiddush on beer and on other beverages, provided that they are Chamar Medina, right? And this is like most Rishonim that rule not like the Rambam. The Rambam, like I mentioned, right, that you can never make kiddush on anything but wine and bread. But in terms of drinks, you can only make kiddush on wine, not on bread, and not on any other beverage. But the Torah rules not like that, and he rules that you can make kiddush and Havdalah on Chamar Medina. And of course, that the question is, what's considered that you have wine, what's considered you don't have wine. Posting are very busy with this. We'll speak about it a bit more later, but we'll get to it. Down below that on page number 2, we have the same halacha concerning Havdalah, and over there we find you're not allowed to make Havdalah on bread. And on Havdalah and Sheikha, you can make Havdalah on beer. The same as kiddush. All right. Now let's have a look. Of course.
Practically speaking, in today's day and age, let's say I'm in a country where there's no kosher wine, no kosher grape juice. I go to the grocery store. What do I buy? Make kiddush.
Right.
Well, let's say I'm doing a juice cleanse or
good question.
Water fast. Can I make kiddush on water?
Yeah, no. Water, no water. But juice maybe. And let's get to it. We're getting to that. We'll get there. I promise. I didn't promise. Well, we'll get there. All right. We'll get there. Let's see the Shulchan Aruch. These are the rules of Shulchan Aruch, page 4. All right. Jonah brings the Torah. He brings the Shem Be'Shem and brings the Rambam. But then he brings the Rosh, and the Rosh is very important. All right. Says the Shulchan Aruch like this. You have it, Sif Test. This is in Reishain Beis. Right, Reishain Beis, Hilchos Kiddush. Says the Shulchan Aruch, "B'makom she'im yain matzu yeshemim shemekanchem an hashecha, u'shar mashkim chutz min hamayim. Yeshemim she'im mekanchem." Ula Rosh, says the Shulchan Aruch, that yeshemim mekanchem is the Rambam, right? Ula Rosh, says the Shulchan Aruch, "B'layla lo yekadesh an hashecha." At night, don't use beer, ela ala pas. Right, because pas, like we saw already, is very chashuv. Right, pas has a special chashivas, and especially if you're into bread, so pas has a special virtue, and that's good l'chol hadiyos. While, like we saw in the Gemara, sheicha is more dodgy, and like the Rambam paskins, you're not yotze at all. So at night you're better off with bread. However, baboker yotze tov l'kadesh al sheicha. So first of all, Andy, to your question, all right, the Rosh says, night, you're better off making kiddush on bread, right? So if you're in a place where you don't have wine, or you're on some kind of a strange diet, or a recovering alcoholic and there's no grape juice, or you hold that grape juice isn't called wine, there are places who don't like grape juice. We generally accept grape juice today, but nevertheless, bread is a good option. But says the Rosh, by day, bread is not a good option. And you know why is bread not a good option in the day? So he says, the divrei tam heim, all right? Do you hear what the Rosh is saying? The Rosh is saying something very simple. The Rosh is saying that in the day, what is kiddush in the day? Very priyagofen, that's it. So if you're making kiddush on bread, what's your kiddush going to be? So where's your kiddush? There's no kiddush, right? If you make kiddush on wine, so you're saying before you start your meal, But if you're making kiddush just on bread, so your kiddush is undiscernible. Is there such a word? Indiscernible. It's not discernible. All right. You can't tell that this guy's making kiddush at all because all he's doing is saying Hamutzi lechem min haaretz. So it says, I'm sorry. It's just psukim. It's not kiddush. So, but yeah, but it's artificial. It's artificial. It's not the real kiddush. It's artificial. But it's not a heker, or it's not a halachic heker. It's like I can say it's Shabbos today. Okay, nice. So you're like you can scream it out loud, but we want a halachic heker. Again, it's not a heker in the kiddush itself. It's an artificial heker. We want the kiddush to be prominent. We want the kiddush to be something which stands out for itself without being part of the meal. Your real kiddush is your meal. You can say before, I hereby make kiddush, but that's an artificial.
That's the reason why they call it kiddush.
That's one reason. That Chazal wanted to also because it's the Rabbanan, so Chazal wants to give it more. Yes. So says the Rosh that by night make your kiddush on bread, but by day make your kiddush on beer. And says the Ramah, V'chein aminik poshet, k'divrei harosh. All right, so what do we see? We see that at night better to make your kiddush on bread. However, you can make your kiddush on shecha, but it's preferable to make your kiddush on bread. If you're on a no gluten diet or something, you can't make kiddush on bread. Then of course make kiddush on whatever you can, and that would be your shecha or your Chamar Medina, and we'll discuss in a moment exactly what is Chamar Medina. That's very important to discuss, of course. However, in the day you should make the kiddush specifically on shechar rather than on bread. Now I'll just point out that the Mishnah Berurah says, look at Mishnah Berurah Sif Katan Chof Zayin. All right, he says, Uladina, you see the underlying part. Uladina yesh li zar lechatchila shelo lekaret balal Hashem mashli chut min hayayin. I pass. Right, like I mentioned, lechatchila at night, wine or bread. If you're in trouble, you don't have. All right, so use something else. But lechatchila, wine or bread at night. However, if you can, then wine or bread. And like I said, by day, it's more maker. Now, what about in places where you have wine, right? We saw that, like we saw in the Torah, right? In places where Chamar Medina is classified as a place where you don't have wine. What about a place where you do have wine, as you correctly pointed out? And nowadays, you have wine everywhere. Where don't you have wine? That's not true. Some places you don't have kosher wine. And the Bishop already said, the Beis Yosef already says, if you don't have kosher wine, then that's called a place where you don't have wine. All right. But most places you have wine. So the Mishnah Berurah already says, he says, Umikol Makom, it's next to the little Lamed Ches. It's called Choftes, next to the Lamed Ches. So Umikol Makom im Dinasenu, Shayayin B'Yoker, wine is expensive. But Rav Shtiyas Medina who Misham Mashkin, and most people drink other stuff. So Lo Nagu, Afilu Aktoidim, the Hada Acha Yayin B'Yoy. Listen to what the minig was in, I don't exactly know where, but Lithuania, other parts of Europe, presumably. Even Gedolim were not noyeg lahada achayayin b'yoyim. They were not worried about searching for wine for kiddush in the day, right? But rather they used other mashkin. And like we said, kiddush shalohu rak midrabanan. It's only rabbinic lekula alma. And therefore, even though we saw that Chamar Medina, according to the Torah, is only when you don't have wine, but for kiddush by day, which is only rabbinic, it's only drabanan anyway. So even the Gedolim, in wherever the Mishnah is, even the Gedolim are noyeg, had a minhag of using other mashkin. And they rely on the mekilim. for it. Now he says, it's a very nice minute to be careful to use wine by day also, but he says, okay, even the Gedolim, even those who are the great rabbinic authorities, luminaries of the generation, are making kiddush by day on other mashkin. Now,
even that's qualified because yain is biyoker.
well, it's true that he starts off by saying,
He's a reason.
he starts off by saying shayayin b'yoker. It's true, but it sounds like he's saying shayayin b'yoker is the reason why we drink a lot of other beverages. But it's not necessarily the reason why the Gedolim don't want to use wine. Could be they don't want to use wine because they prefer beer. He doesn't say that. He says shayayin b'yoker, and therefore, look at the sentence, right? Right, and therefore Rov Shtias is because of that. It's not necessarily the reason why the Gedolim didn't use wine. No, he doesn't say that. No, he does not say that.
It's not clear if the low nod was because of the yain biyoker or
I think the simple meaning is, well, not put on it.
Well, he also says biro. In other words, there are two reasons on it.
No, that's not necessarily two reasons. It could be wine is b'yoker, and therefore Rov Shtia is not wine, but rather other beverages, because wine is expensive. Right? Not necessarily two things there. That's possibly one thing. So I think that the simple meaning of the Shabura is that the people just not mapped on it. Even the Gedolim, and that's why he said even Gedolim are not mapped.
Two sources. So Lam Ches and Lam Tes. He does quote me two different sources for the two.
Well, again, the Taz is a special one, and we'll see about the Taz in a minute.
There's only one source of Taz that seems to say because of the open. So no, your Rambam says no. I haven't seen it in the start.
No, it's the Taz is just that it's Chamar Medina, that it's called Chamar Medina. The Rambam gives us his testimony, but these are not. In any case, I didn't see the Eliyah Rabbah inside, but I'm Moidu Misvada. However, Ein Shom, absolutely. Avopanim says the Mishabura on Lamed, right? Sifkot on Lamed. Now he's worried about whiskey now, right? Vim chaviv lo yain saruf. What about if a guy likes whiskey? Says Yachal lekanish alav b'yoyim lechatchila b'mdinaseinu. Right, lechatchila. It's good. No problem. Says Achshizai lekach kois machzik revius. All right. He says the Mishabura. That it's not the answer. It's the Mishabura. Shmuel says take kois machzik revius v'lishtes memenu malay lukmov shurev revius. Not so simple. All right. You have to drink a malay lukmov. A malay lukmov is a good, 30 cc. Depends how big your mouth is, but it's a good few cc. It's sorry.
Which is another lukmov, which is it?
It does. So how much is review? So if you hold at least 80.
No, again, malay lukmov depends on your personal mouth.
He's saying it's revius. He says malay lukmov.
Again, revius is if you want to be machmir. Revius would come to something like 40, 36, 37 cc.
Yeah.
Or 38 cc, which is a reasonable amount. It's more than a shot glass.
Agreed.
It's a bit more than a shot. But okay. So says the Mishabura. However, the question of defining what exactly is considered Chamar Medina is a delicate question. It's not a simple question. We saw the Rambam, right? The Rambam says, if you remember in the Torah, right? The Rambam says Medina she roiv yeina sheicha, right? A place where the custom is to drink sheicha, where that's the normal drink, right? And Shochna Harav, I think it's page 3. Here, Shochna Harav. I wouldn't read it inside now, but Shochna Harav says that there are two conditions, right? Shochna says it has to, number one, be a drink that you use in your meals, all right? Like wine. Wine isn't something that you stam drink. Right? Wine isn't something that you stam drink. It's a beverage that you have in your meals. It's choshev, right? It's what you take to your meals. So also here, it has to be the kind of drink that you put on the table as a choshev drink, right? Oh, that's a very interesting question. There are some who say that only alcoholic drinks can work as Chamar Medina. It's meant. I saw this in Moshe Sternberg that only a alcoholic drink. Says this. Yeah, we're not so mad about this, and we use even non-alcoholic drinks. However, there are some who say that you need. Here, it's the Halachas Ktanas, the Sefer Halachas Ktanas. It's brought by Moshe Sternberg from others. He has a Masoris from the Gra, apparently. Rav Moshe Sternberg, Shabbos on Haggis and Chelik Dalet, that only something which is alcoholic, but that has a special importance. However, we see from other poskim not. I think it's very clear from the Rishonim that even drinks that are non-alcoholic. Why do I think that's clear? Because they're all very busy pointing out that water doesn't work. Now, if you say that any non-alcoholic drink can't be Chamar Medina, then the special emphasis on water doesn't make sense. Water is a special drink. It's not just non-alcoholic. It also doesn't have a taste. Like the Gemara in Bracha says, you don't make a bracha on water unless you're thirsty. Meaning it's a special drink. It has a special nature. And the fact that the Rishonim are so busy pointing out that water doesn't work, I think is a strong indication that other beverages, even if they're not alcoholic, can still work as Chamar Medina. And that's a stima suppose here. However, says a Shulchan Aruch Harav, it needs to be a choshev drink, a drink that you put on the table. Tea or coffee. Okay, so these are all big questions. What about tea and coffee? What about milk? The Mishnah Berurah says milk is no good. Right? Why does the Mishnah Berurah say milk is no good? Because the Mishnah Berurah says that milk, you don't drink milk by itself. Apparently in the Mishnah Berurah, wherever he was, they didn't drink milk by itself. Rather, you use drink as in your coffee or in your tea or something else. But you don't use it as an independent drink. And therefore, it's not, that can't be a Chamar Medina. It's not drunk by itself. Look at Rav Moshe. Rav Moshe has a very interesting. Rav Moshe's tshuva is on page 6 or 7 or something. 7. Rav Moshe is speaking about, right? What he's speaking about? But minute mashke shel soda. Exactly, soda. You know, all these words in English Moshe are always funny. So soda water, right? He's worried about soda, and I think it's soda, maybe also Coca-Cola. And he says, if you look at what he says these are just water. He says, this is water, he says. And he says, why? Very interesting. He says, because you serve water, not because you want to give someone kavod to give him respect, but rather to quench your thirst. And he says, any drink that's served not by way of giving respect, by being mechabed someone, but rather you're serving it in order to quench your thirst, that can't be Chamar Medina. Chamar Medina is only the type of drink that's served as a kavod, that's served as a respect. And therefore he says soda's no good, he says. I think there's room to, it's very delicate, these definitions. He says, it has to be b'shvil kavod ha'seuda v'kloid ha'orchim. It's delicate definitions.
Yehoshua, for example, says that there's no greater Chamar Medina than coffee. So you serve it at any simcha, at a wedding, the king would have it on his table.
Well, coffee is an excellent question. Concerning coffee, there's a long tshuva, and the Tzitziler here speaks about coffee. It's on page 7. He speaks about tea and coffee. It's already mentioned in the Aruch HaShulchan, actually, which we have over here. And the Aruch HaShulchan is very against tea and coffee. Aruch HaShulchan must be somewhere around there also. Page 6, thank you. Aruch HaShulchan is very against tea and coffee. He says at the end, where the finger is on the side, these fingers indicate like big kiddush. So tea, right? Tei matok, right? you can't call that Chamar Medina. Like no way. And you know what? I think it's a completely different type of drink to wine, right? Tea and coffee are a different type of drink. You drink it in a different context to wine. Tea and coffee don't accompany a meal the way that wine accompanies a meal. You drink a good coffee for breakfast, for sure. Some of us do, but in a very different sense to wine. And I think that's why he's saying like, this is not Chamar Medina, and therefore he doesn't like it. He doesn't like it at all. The Aruch HaShulchan. However, and some poskim, the Tzitz Eliezer is busy with this. The tea and coffee maybe is also is water, is considered water. Although I find that difficult. I think that anything which has gone through a process is not water. Like we find, virtually all liquids are water based. So once, except for wine, correct?
Unless you're mosaic.
Correct, but beer is water. Yeah, and beer is Chamar Medina. So the fact that this is like watery, I don't think it's such a problem. On coffee, Tzitz Eliezer is more worried about coffee. Why? Because other beverages have been cooked with something else, right? You've cooked the water with something, and that cooking has given it taste. But in the case of coffee, you haven't cooked it with anything. You just mixed something in. Instant coffee. Percolated coffee would be better, yes. And that's a good point, right? The coffee machines that have, or the French, whatever it is, these fancy coffee.
Are we assuming Havdalah and Kiddush are the same?
I'm sorry? Yes. The general assumption is that Kiddush and Havdalah are the same, with a caveat that Leil Shabbos you should be making your Kiddush on bread, right? But otherwise, and milk, of course, like as I mentioned, the Mishnah Berurah says milk is no good. However, Rav Moshe Feinstein already says that milk you can be makel on because we're all drinking milk now.
It's better than soda.
Yeah, milk is more.
It's not water based.
Well, he says water, and I think he's right. Milk we don't drink just to quench our thirst. We drink milk for a geschmack of pint of milk. I'm not sure. Let me just before I finish, I want to speak about the whiskey, because as we know, there is a common custom to make your kiddush on a shot glass of whiskey, and that custom comes from, it's based on the Taz. The Taz says, I'm not going to see it now, but the Taz says concerning brachos, hilchos brachos of ber nefashos, the Taz says that even though generally speaking, the share of liquid is a reverse and so on, but and you have to drink it fast, but the share kadesh is reversed. But whiskey is different, says the Taz. Yain sraf is different. The reason being because you can't drink whiskey fast, and the amount of whiskey that's considered a choshev amount is different from the amount of water or wine for that matter, right? As we know, you take a wine glass, which is, you go to a restaurant, you order wine. When you order wine at a restaurant, you get a full wine glass. When you order whiskey at a restaurant, you get, a bit of whiskey. It's a different way of drinking, right?
Is the way of drinking the way it's served?
It's a way of drinking, and that's why you get a serve.
You don't drink a reverse yarn down like that.
You drink a good, don't know.
I don't. I think
whiskey is that's true, but it's still a beverage. It's everything. So again, so like we saw that the Mishnah Berurah says you've got to take, even on whiskey, you have to take a full reverse of whiskey and to drink a malay logmuk. Okay, the Mishnah Berurah doesn't even bring the Taz, certainly not the Indian kiddush, and the Taz really is right his kiddush about dinei brachos. However, already several poskim. First of all, the several poskim agreed to the task of Sefer and others, and a number of poskim mention the minig of making kiddush on a small amount of whiskey based on the task. Since whiskey has a different categorization than other beverages, not just whiskey, by the way. Yain Sraf means anything which is 40%. Spirits. That's right, spirits. Strong liquors and so on. So anything like this. So there are poskim, and especially Hasidic poskim, the Rashbam. I think over here we have Rashbam that I wrote here, page 8 maybe or 9, something towards the end. Yeah, it's on page 10 at the bottom. This is the Rashbam. Bedin kiddush shel yom tzarich shiur kos, right? Do you need a shiur kos? And then he says, look at where the finger is, right? He brings from the Rav Chitzarov, which was a very famous Hasidic Rebbe, but also Pesach. Shetziva letalmidav lekaddish b'yom yad Rav al tzluches koton, to make kiddush on a small shot glass of wine, right? Kederach shtiyosei, because that's a regular way to drink it. Ve'ein tzarich shiur kos. V'gam shehayla fan of yain. This is an amazing case. There was wine on the table. And nevertheless, he told his talmidim, make kiddush on a shot glass of whiskey. Kedei lehoreis halacha letalmidim, in order to make sure that everyone will get this halacha. And he says it's Chamar Medina. He says it's the way that we drink almost every meal. We start our meals off with a shot of whiskey. Not sure if everyone here does that, of course. So in any case, so we see over here, he brings the Avbesim from Kaminka and from others, and certainly among Hasidim, this is a very common custom. So certainly, if you have the minute to do it, then it's good. If you don't have the minute to do it from Aviseinu, then taking a revius is lechatchila, it's better. However, for kiddush hayom, we see the Mishabura is first of all is pretty makel for kiddush hayom using other beverages. He says wine is the best. However, pretty makel to using other beverages. By the way, orange juice, I think. Orange juice, there was in Chazon Ish, there's a very interesting correspondence between Rav Chaim Kanievsky and the Chazon Ish about Chamar Medina, because the Chazon Ish, he wasn't happy with any Chamar Medina here. He said, well, people don't drink beer, but he said, well, they also don't drink wine, so and not so clear. Now, Rav Chaim Kanievsky said, what about orange juice? Like orange juice, everyone drinks. And the Chazon Ish was, maybe orange juice is Chamar Medina. Pattern is.
Let's say God put enough diabetic, ketogenic diet, covering alcohol, like gluten-free.
Asking for trouble. You would just make kiddush on beans.
Wheatgrass. Green juice.
I didn't think so.
So you're supposed to do nothing.
You make kiddush on nothing. Absolutely, you would make kiddush without saying the verification. You just make the kiddush together. Yeah, again, there's a mitzvah of katir alayim.
That's not heckler.
Again, you wouldn't be doing the kiddush, the mitzvah of kiddush alayim, but you would be doing the mitzvah of kiddush.
On what?
On nothing.
That's not heckler.
Again, the heckler.
The way the Mishabura puts down is they have to be a heckler.
One second.
Sorry?
The hecker.
That's fine. It's Mishabura, but not just doing nothing.
No, the hecker is a problem with a guy who's eating a meal and then says the Rosh, you have to make kiddush before the meal. Otherwise, you're just starting the meal. We don't see you making kiddush. This guy, he's fasting. He's not eating anything. He's just fasting through. So if you're just fasting, make kiddush on nothing. But if you're eating something, then make kiddush on whatever you're eating. Yeah.
When you say make kiddush
Yeah, I mean, do it.
That's Friday night.
Friday night, he's talking about.
You have to do it anyway.
I'm sorry?
The Yom Tov.
You have the same principles.
Well, no, the Yom Tov, you're required to eat bread.
You're required to eat on Shabbos also.
No, you're not.
Bread,
But not meat and wine.
not meat and wine, correct.
So
You're right. Yom Tov, you drink your wine anyway, so you might as well make kiddush. Shabbos might be the right, correct. And he's talking about a guy that doesn't have. Yeah, of course. At night, like we saw at night, he's asking about a very hypothetical case. You know, he likes these, far out cases. All right, let's get on marriage.